Joseph Oddo is a member of the Alliance Party, which is an independent party that is working hard to change elections and politics for the betterment of the United States. Today, I talk one-on-one with Joseph about his campaign for the 6th Congressional District for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Joseph Oddo, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, Quintin, great to meet you, sir.
I appreciate meeting you as well virtually. I know that for a very long time you've always wanted to come on Quintin's Close-Ups because, needless to say, you're running as an independent candidate, particularly with the Alliance Party, for the 6th Congressional District. So tell me, when you think of the 6th Congressional District, what does that consist of right now?
Well, it consists of an individual that's been there way too long, for one thing. I mean, they did gerrymander it to protect his territory, which is, a couple of the systematic things I'm trying to work on fixing in the country, and that's one of them. And it may seem odd for an old person like me to be running, but we have term limits in the Alliance Party. So even after a 12-year term, I'd still be younger than the incumbent.
What other systematic issues that you want to tackle when it comes to to that problem and the 6th Congressional District?
Well, the gerrymandering, we successfully got rid of it. I lived in Virginia, and I just moved here 5 years ago. And the way we did it was simply, look, we can do redistricting with non-partisan commissions. And it took a little work. We had to get it through the legislature. We had to put it on the ballot, let the voters decide on it. That's something that's missing here in South Carolina. So those little fixes around the edges like that can also lead to better outcomes, more people challenging, more people stepping up to stand for office. So right now we have half the seats unopposed. That's pathetic. I mean, we can do way better than that. And it's sad that the civics in this country has diminished so much that the people who, are a couple generations removed from having been taught civics, they don't even know the liberties that they're losing. So these are some of the systematic issues, like let's teach civics, let's fix elections, let's have ranked choice or instant runoff in this state. We spend way too much money on runoff elections when we can just have ranked choice. Like there's 5 of us on the ballot now. People, if they can't pick me first, I ask them pick me second. It's okay. That gives people really a good choice rather than holding their nose and picking 1 or 2, of lesser evils. So there are a lot of fixes we can make to improve elections, for one thing.
Going back to what you said earlier about obviously some liberties that have been obviously, lost because of, elections and politics, really, what you mentioned. Congressman Clyburn, who's the current congressman for the 6th Congressional District, has been in office since 1992. What liberties have the actual constituents lost in this district because of his long time in the office?
Well, it points more to the general. I mean, we are all in the same country. So when we lose liberties because of censorship, that's part of a big party problem. There are leaders in his party, and he's one of those that toes the line of the party leadership. So when those folks say, oh, we have to censor people who don't agree with taking the jab or that promote disinformation, how are they going to measure that? Who's going to be the arbiter of deciding what free speech gets canceled? And those kind of little disruptions on our liberty turn into big ones. I mean, you're in a pretty precarious profession, media, because if you buck the wrong people, like Julian Assange did, look what happened to him, man. He lost 14 years of his life. So the liberties are being chipped away at, and it's not a specific to this district issue, but it is specific to people like him who are the face of institutional stagnation and stay way too long.
Yes, sir. Let me ask you then, what other things are being censored when it comes to the 6th Congressional District?
Well, again, you keep coming back to censorship, and it's not just here in the 6th, but I appreciate that the voters here are concerned about what's going on here in the 6th, and they think that the incumbent is bringing the money for them. Yeah, I got $120 million for a bridge. That's the constituent services that he's supposed to bring. But is he doing anything to help promote our extension of our liberties? Like are they, free speech is key. Let's start there. Let's make sure that we, as citizens, have the chance to redress our grievances with the government and not be stepped on. Those are the issue. I don't know what else to tell you about it as far as censorship. You know what's going on. I mean, anybody that's in your media space right now that wants to say anything bad about Israel, man, they will have the AIPAC lobby on them. There was Cori Bush in Missouri who had $10 million thrown at her so she could lose in a primary by being on the side of Palestine and innocent people getting blown to pieces. So that's the censorship that's going on, and those folks, your incumbent congressman, stands around and lets it happen.
What grievances do you have with the government right now?
Well, the grievances are not. One is, let's balance the budget. They keep coming up with continuing resolutions. That's a terrible way to run a government. I'm not trying to expand grievances. There's plenty of them and plenty of people pitching grievances every day. So, but what we need to do is compromise. Look, there was once a founding of the country on compromise, right? They had to compromise on certain principles to get it accomplished, or we wouldn't have had this union. Now we have to do the same. We have to have a conference committee to hammer out a budget for the whole fiscal year, not continuing resolutions, not with the threat of the government closing down held over our head. Those folks are not committed to solving any solutions, and they're driving the deficit up by not paying attention to the pieces of the puzzle that need fixed.
So what is the current deficit for this particular country?
Well, it's $30 trillion and growing by billions an hour, man. It's tragic, and it's an embarrassment. That budget should be a value statement to our values as citizens, and the fact that they let the next generations have such a burden hung on them, that's tragic. So we, as boomers and the generations that are in charge right now, should be embarrassed to leave that with the future generation. I mean, it's one thing people can handle is discrimination. They can handle poverty, but you know what they can't handle is the lack of hope. And if they're hung with that kind of dark cloud going into the future, that's diminishing their hope that the country still has a American dream in front of them. That we need to restore that. Negotiation's not a bad thing. In a negotiation, right now you're watching the two fight it out like a sports arena. One has to win, the other one has to lose. But it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be both sides getting something, both a win-win situation.
So what should be the win-win situation when it comes to balancing the budget?
Well, there's two easy ways to do that. One is you bring home the troops who are in areas that aren't combat zones, that we shouldn't be in 800 bases around the world. We could bring troops home and build infrastructure here. That's billions and billions of dollars. And right now, the folks in Western Carolina, Northern Georgia, and upstate South Carolina, they need the help immediately. I mean, the incumbent vice president the other day said, "Oh, we're going to give these folks $750 immediately." Okay, well, they give Israel $8 billion immediately. So there's some imbalance going on right there, and there's you can see the point I'm driving at there.
Well, let me ask you this, Joseph. You talked about Israel, and obviously, money has been going over to that particular part of the world. Should we continue to fund Ukraine as well?
Well, look, the whole military being an offensive unit, we are supposed to be a defensive unit, right? That's what we should do. If we just had a whole different mindset towards how we address those conflict areas around the world and set up better defenses. And there is some validity to having NATO be underwritten by other members. So I think it's just maybe a little overkill. If they actually, we could probably trust sending money to those places to defend our interests if we could trust that the money was being spent legitimately. But right now, the Pentagon continues for the last for infinite time. I ran 20 years ago on almost the same issue. They need an auditable accounting system. There's fraud, waste, abuse, and improper payments going out. They don't even know where it's going. And that is a part of their own report that comes out every year. So until we fix those fundamental problems and get the government reined in, I mean, the government should be this citizen power. That's what it should be. We are the ones that should be taking over the government and overseeing what's wrong and fixing it. We can't leave it to the career politicians to do that.
So what exactly are those improper payments when it comes to Ukraine?
Well, it's not. It's a general. They put in their own budget report that says we don't know where we lost this money, and multiply that when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was way bigger then. But that's the report. They say, hey, we can't account for some of this money where it's going, and so that's just another embarrassment of how the government operates. So when it comes to Ukraine, same thing. It doesn't. I mean, when you have contractors who are finding ways to put cash in their pockets without reporting it, that's got to be something that's going on. I mean, there's definitely some problems there if they put it in their own report that says we can't get a handle on this. Why? Because they won't put an auditable accounting system in the Pentagon.
Well, let me ask you this. How many contractors have been sent over to Ukraine and have been actually been paid by the United States government?
Well, no, who's going to have that answer? That's not an issue that I can address. I would need to research that one. If I was member up on the Hill, then yeah, I'd probably be able to dig into that. But they're not going to reveal that information to civilians like me. Those issues are just the distraction issues, right? The bigger picture is let's balance the budget. Let's fix the elections that are broken. People are losing faith in elections. Why shouldn't we? Like for instance, why they talk about voters are going to get knocked off the rolls if they don't vote. Why should they even have to register to vote? They should show up on election day with the proper ID at the right polling place, and they should be able to register to vote right then and there and cast a vote. Election day should be a holiday. Why should Columbus Day be a holiday? Election day is a day we ought to be celebrating, right? Let's have a barbecue, a cookout at the election polls. Let's make Columbus Day the election day, a holiday, instead of, instead of a slap in the face to the indigenous.
Well, let me ask you this. What elections locally are broken in your mind?
The fact that you have to have a runoff, the fact that you have to have primaries, there's two broken pieces right there. Only about 8% of the people decide who gets nominated in primaries. 8% in the whole country. And that's, that small minority is usually on the extremes. The people who go to vote in those primaries are the ones that aren't looking for compromise. They're the ones seeking to demonize their opponents. They're the ones in the sports arena saying, those people suck. We can't afford to have them in office anymore. You got to vote against them. So they're not voting for anything. Everybody's voting defensively. So you make primaries open. We should be able to vote. I mean, and maybe in this state we can do that. We can choose one or the other. But why should we have to have two parties to begin with? That uniparty is spoiling elections for us independents. We're not the spoilers. They are. The fact that they don't give us an inch to be allowed in debates. We had a forum last week.
Right.
The incumbent congressman didn't show up. I mean, that's the systematic program that they put in place. Don't give anybody any opposition. We don't want competition. We don't want a fair marketplace. In every other marketplace, every other economy that works, there's competition, but not in political.
How should this economy work?
How should what?
How should the economy work?
Well, what do you mean? How should the economy work? Which economy?
So you talked about. You just mentioned obviously the economy. You talked about that. I'm only going by what you just said.
Election marketplace.
Yes, sir. So
yes,
what is?
Sir.
Let me ask you this, Dan. What is the state of that? What is the state of that?
Well, I have an national election reform platform. It has 10 points. Those I mentioned a couple already. Election day holiday, same day voter registration. But there's more. The folks that live in D.C., they don't have voting representation in Congress. Now, why should we in South Carolina care about that? Because if we can't care about our brothers and sisters there in D.C., then how are we going to care about the folks upstate that need help during this hurricane recovery? See, that's another piece of the puzzle. There's also the gerrymander. We talked about that. So we address instant runoff voting so that we can get rid of runoffs. Runoffs are a joke because since so few people vote as it is on a regular election day, even half as many come out for a runoff. So again, you got a small pool of people deciding who's going to represent them. And here's what's powerful about ranked choice voting. You got let's say you got 8 people on the ballot. You know, somebody could win with 18% of the vote. That meant that almost 80% of the people voted against that person. So if you have a ranked choice where you pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you knock off the 5th person when the counting's, if nobody gets a majority on the first round, then you count the 2s, knock off another one, count the 3s until someone gets a majority. Now at least the citizens have stated who they really want to represent. There's so many fixes at the peripheral that we can do, Quintin, that I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to bring to light, because the media blackout on folks like us who don't raise enough money to be in the debates. And like why shouldn't last night there was a debate, or a couple of nights ago, between the vice presidential candidates. There's third-party candidates out there too. Why shouldn't they have been invited? That's just the arbitrariness of it all. Is just that uniparty wants to keep us all down. You see above me, that's a grand illusion that's going on. That there's actually 2 parties fighting it out. There's very small ideological differences between the 2. They both are products of the war machine, and they're not going to do anything about scaling back, blowing people up around the world.
What other illusions are there in the grand scheme of things in your mind from a political standpoint?
What are there? What?
Yeah, you talked about obviously grand illusion. What are those other illusions when it comes to politics here in the states?
Well, the illusion that the 2 big parties have our best interests in hand. Look, here's a perfect scenario. They both had the big convention in a big auditorium, big sports arena, right? And all the rank and file folks are on the floor. Those are the folks that are going to go out, knock on doors, they're going to be the foot soldiers for rounding up votes, right? Meanwhile, up in the suites up above is who? The elites, the oligarchs, the people who are looking down on them. They're the ones that throw them $1 million or $10 million. I mean, that kind of money that's in politics right now is pathetic. Another piece of the election reform platform. And they're who gets attention then when it comes to picking up the phone. Who's like, can I go and pick up the phone as a citizen? Can I go lobby my representative? Not unless I can afford $100 a plate or $1,000 a plate dinner, right? I mean, so citizen lobbying is a missing piece too. We advocate for, yeah, I can do that in Columbia, but we need way more people to do it. Show up at the rope, call our representative out. They talk to us for 5 minutes. That's lobbying in South Carolina, the most basic element. So instead of 5 or 10 of us carrying an issue like that, we need hundreds of us to do that. That's the only way we're going to get them to pay attention. And when it comes to Washington, same thing. I mean, we the citizens should have equal access to our representatives as those who spend $1,000 a plate or throw $10 million at them. That's who has their ear. These folks. The only reason they keep running for re-election, the blinders that they have on, I have to do what my party says, because if I buck the party, I'm going to be primary. Get rid of that closed primary system, and you'll have people with honor, serving with better credentials. Like all of us 4 challenging this incumbent can do just as well a job. There's he has no preordained or hierarchy of talent to do that job.
What credentials do you have?
I've got a public policy degree. I've got a dozen items written up, bills ready to pass. I've been an activist for a long time, but paying attention and listening, those are the key credentials I have. And we act for we advocate for positive solutions, Quintin, not just throwing daggers, arrows at our opponents. Balancing the budget. It's key. Those folks who are in the office now, one of the first bills we'll sponsor, and here, our alliance, you brought that up earlier. We have an alliance around the country now, a Fulcrum Caucus. There's 5 or 6 of us running. All it's going to take is 6 to 8 of us to change the fate. We are going to form a caucus and not caucus with the other 2. We're going to have our own caucus and bring those parties to the table and make sure we hammer out a budget so that we can balance that budget. And anybody who cannot balance it, if they can't balance a budget, they shouldn't be allowed, permitted to run for re-election.
Do you know how to balance a budget?
Of course. I mean, that's economics 101, man. You probably studied it in college too. I mean, it's don't spend more than you take in. That's pretty simple.
I really can. I want to get back to obviously the 6th congressional district, but let me ask you, what is the state of that particular district in your mind?
Well, in my mind, like I said, if we don't care about the folks in D.C. not having voter representation in Congress, how are we going to care about the marginalized folks in the 6th? So again, that's a piece of the puzzle. If you are more efficient on how you're wasting money in the Pentagon, you can channel that money back to the 6th and build the infrastructure that folks need. We can bring more manufacturing jobs here. There's a good workforce just ready to be tapped into here in the 6th, and we can make it a vibrant community. One of the members in the forum the other day said we should have light rail system here in the 6th. Okay, I've been advocating high-speed rail around the country for years. So why not? Let's start it here in Charleston and shoot it all the way across the country. High-speed rail. We're not talking about 100-mile-an-hour rail here, Quintin, that the U.S. is embarrassingly the highest we get. Around the world, you can go to Italy or Japan or China and run 300 mile an hour. That's what we need. We can use the existing right-of-ways of the highways and elevate magnetic levitation rail and get from city to city faster on train than we can by plane. Those are some of the pieces of the puzzle that can improve things here in the 6th.
Well, how much money would that cost their average constituent here in this district?
Well, it's always about how much money, right? But if you, again, we're talking about rechanneling dollars that are being wasted overseas on our military bases. Yes, if it's going to cost a few $1 billion to do, that money is there. We are the richest country in the world. We should be embarrassed that we have 1 million unhoused, hungry children every night in this country. We should be embarrassed about that. We should take the money, the resources of our country, and use it for the good of the country in the bigger picture, man. Let's commit to that rather than committing to who's our biggest payer, our biggest investor in our campaign. That's whose phone we answer. No, that's not how we do business.
What other resources would you use to help those kids come out of, obviously poverty and hunger?
Well, there's plenty of resources that can be used. I mean, we form coalitions with anybody that wants to form coalitions with us. That's why we call ourselves the Alliance Party. There are many organizations that are doing good work out there right now. Braver Angels is holding workshops to bring the opposing parties together to have dialogue. StoryCorps is bringing individuals together to meet each other from the other opposite sides of the spectrum. We've got many things like that we can pool those resources and make things better at the societal level. But the political institutions are standing in the way. And this is why those of us who run outside of those two parties, we do that to draw attention to the fact of that. And we also do it to recruit others to do this, because I can't do it indefinitely, but I'm out here saying, look, folks, we need you to get more involved in civics, pay attention to what's going on, even local government especially, because that's where they're really digging into your pocket for your tax money. That's more important sometimes than the national issues. So we just need more people step up, stand for office, get involved, pay attention to what's going on, and don't just show up every 4 years.
To ask you this, how do you actually create conversations with a shared common ground when it comes to the 6th Congressional District?
Well, there's folks that live here in this district or not far from it up in Columbia that are with Brave Rangers. They are holding workshops. There are plenty of organizations on the ground. We go and start with the churches. We start with other social, the labor groups and any association. I go to chamber events pretty regularly.
Right.
We have conversations there. It's just about rather than going and having conversations about who's the evil one and what are our grievances and why we hate this guy or why this guy's a threat to democracy. No, that's the conversations that need to stop. We need to shift them to positive solutions. All right, we have 8 things we disagree on, but let's find the 2 things we do agree on. Okay, let's start there. That's a good basis right there. We can start with that, find our common ground, because we all want a safer, healthier world, right? So those are good places to start. We all want better food, less poison in our food. We want better health care. Those are the common ground issues, Quintin. It's not that hard, man. It can be done if we just commit to it.
What 2 issues that do you and the other parties actually agree on?
Well, it was funny. The libertarian guy and I agreed on eliminating income tax, but that's a more complex issue. So we would have to address that. Some of the others were okay with some of the national election reform platform stuff I had. So they agree that we should have maybe instant runoff voting. Some of them agree with that. Get rid of the runoffs. Ranked choice, the election day holiday. I mean, these are things that are easy fixes. These are things that don't generate a whole lot of opposition, except for the status quo folks who don't want to give an inch. They are worried about, all they want to worry about is protecting what they have, and they got the blinders on. Who's paying me? I don't have to address any citizen issues because, re-election is the most important thing. And that's why people like the incumbent who stay too long, that's where his blinders are on and he can't see the people anymore.
If you were to take those blinders off, what would he see as far as citizen issues?
Well, he would see ways to get rid of runoff voting. I mean, those are starters. He's got homeless people living in his district. He's not going out to do anything about them. I mean, he's got, he can bring more manufacturing in here rather than say, oh, I got $100 million for this bridge. That's just manipulating one piece of the puzzle. You can't just pound your chest over things that are natural, day-to-day activities. You got to be involved and pressed into the community. Once upon a time, he probably was, but I can tell you this now, in his advanced age, I doubt that he's even, out pressing the flesh anymore that much. And if he wouldn't show up at the forum, that pretty much says what his commitment is to letting the voters hear about his issues.
Speaking of the issues, how many manufacturing jobs do they actually need right now in the 6th Congressional District?
You can never have too many. I mean, it's not just manufacturing, but you get those. If you do get another 2 or 3 manufacturing, then you get a lot of offshoot jobs too. You get a lot of service for those folks. Those folks need homes that need built. And so the peripheral business around all of that, that's just, the fundamental pieces of infrastructure, fundamental pieces of economy that help grow. I mean, I lived in Northern Virginia, a suburb of DC, and watched the traffic get maddening, and rather than them fix with more rail lateral, we lost that argument to toll roads. So we don't want to make the same mistakes. People like me are in a unique position to see how growth exponentially grows, but we can grow it smarter than what they did up there.
Well, let me just ask you the basic question. How do you grow this particular area with smart growth?
With smart growth? Well, I'll support one of the provisions that one of the other opponents came up with. Light rail? Sure, let's do that. Let's, there's a lot of issues. Let's ask the people what they want. What do they need? let's start there. Let's put our listening. We got 2 ears and one mouth, and we should be using them in that order, even though we're polished ticians, right?
Have you been able to have a conversation with the average constituent in this district?
Absolutely, man. I enjoy walking the streets of Park Circle and downtown and various other places. When when you listen to people, you hear so many things that you had no clue. Like right there in Park Circle, Cat was telling me about how his folks were involved in stopping a development, keeping it a residential area. Now these stories are all around. You know that those are when the citizens step up and make things happen. Well, even in downtown DC, when I lived there,
Right.
we had a council person running who stopped a gas station. There was already two on four corners, and they're trying to put a third one. He stopped it and turned it into a senior center. These are the wins that you can do at the local level. If you're committed, you find the citizens, hear what's on their mind, hear what they want, and listen to them, and then go to work for them. That's who we're supposed to be here to do, is represent those folks.
What should be the wins for the constituents in the rural areas of the 6th Congressional District?
Well, you know what? That's a good question, man. Because I tell you this: if they have farmland right now, there is a lot of soil erosion. There's a lot of poison in our foods. They could be champions of getting cleaner water, cleaner air, cleaner food supplied to the whole country. There's so much more sustainable agriculture available now. The technology is out there. Let's use this area as an incubator for improving the whole food supply in the country. I mean, there's so many things we do, Quintin, and I appreciate you asking. And you know, if given the opportunity, I'm gonna be out there pressing the flesh more and listening to folks and offering these solutions. And I hear enthusiastic response when we talk about things like this. These folks really want to improve their own communities, and they're willing to come on board.
So, what is your 5-point plan for sustainable, obviously, infrastructure?
Well, I don't know. That would take a little more of a listening to have a 5-point plan. But if you want me to rattle off a couple, here's a couple. We invest in national lead pipe replacement and infrastructure upgrades so we can guarantee safe and affordable drinking water for everyone. We can transition away from the big polluters. Like, you know, right now the regulation industries are basically run by the industry they're trying to regulate. EPA, Big Pharma, CDC, FDA, NIH, all these 3-letter acronyms, they're run by people in the industry. So there's really not regulation to make sure we have clean air, clean food, clean water. We can invest in that high-speed rail I was telling you about. We can enhance our national standards for air and water, get rid of, apply some of the research that we have to clean our oceans and get rid of the plastics and toxins. There, we can reforest, restore millions of acres of public and recreational land and water. I mean, you want 5? I got 10.
What are where exactly is that recreational land that is needed in the 6th Congressional District?
Well, most of it here is water, man. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it available for recreation. Let's, support sustainable agriculture, soil management, sustainable and fair fishing practices. Let's make sure that stuff is taken care of here, so we can make it an incubator, a model of how to do it right for the rest of the country.
Where exactly can you put incubators in the 6th Congressional District?
What do you mean incubate? It's an incubator system. It's a system that here's what we fixed, here's how we did it, track our progress, and then use it as an example for other areas of the country. That's what I mean by incubator.
Gotcha. Well, I'm running out of time because Zoom is only giving me 2 minutes. But Joseph, Joseph Oddo, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, Quintin, it's been a pleasure, man. I look forward to meeting you in person one day, brother.
Thank you. I definitely will. We'll make it happen.